Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Well. Good morning, everyone. I am Jonathan Bowles. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for an Urban Future, and thank you all for joining us today. Big thanks also to the folks that are joining on our live stream. We've got about a couple hundred people that have signed up to watch on the live stream. And a big thank you to Robinhood and Google, our partners and sponsors today. Thank you for the support. The Center for an Urban Future is an independent think tank focused on creating a stronger and more inclusive economy in New York and expanding economic opportunity for all New Yorkers. We know that building a more equitable economy in New York will require a number of new policies and investments. But few things will be as important as ensuring that far more New Yorkers of color can access the well-paying jobs that are growing here. Now more than ever, that means technology jobs. In the past decade, the tech sector accounted for an incredible 17% of all employment growth citywide, creating 114,000 new jobs in the city. To put that into context, during the same period, another high and middle wage sector in New York, hospitals, added 4,000 jobs. The problem is that too many New Yorkers have not been able to access these good jobs in tech. Black and Hispanic New Yorkers make up 43% of the city's overall workforce, but account for just 21% of those employed in the tech sector. Achieving a tech workforce that reflects the diversity of this city will require new investments in multiple areas, including scaling up tech training programs for adults, apprenticeships, and initiatives at CUNY. In fact, you may have seen a report we published just a couple weeks ago detailing the opportunity to harness CUNY as a launchpad into tech careers. But no area presents city leaders with greater potential to close these tech workforce gaps over the longer term than new investments in age-appropriate computing education at the K through 12 level. Doing so would help tackle this opportunity gap at the root, helping to build foundational skills, interests, and confidence in the earliest years. In 2015, the city took a giant step down this road when it launched CS4All, a vital effort to bring computer science education to every New York City public school student in 10 years. CS4All has already had a huge impact, but there's still a lot more that's needed to ensure young New Yorkers are prepared with the foundational computational thinking skills that will be so essential to career success in the years ahead. I'm excited that today's forum will explore exactly what's needed to build on CS4All. So a big thank you to all of our speakers today. Special thanks to City Council Education Committee Chair Rita Joseph and CUNY Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, both of whom will be on our second panel of the day, along with Robinhood CEO and former Deputy Mayor Richard Bury. I'd also like to again thank Robinhood and Google for their support, their partnership, and for all they're doing to create a stronger and fairer city. And now we're going to kick things off with a conversation with the driving force behind the launch of CS4All in New York, Fred Wilson. Fred, who is also the co-founder of Union Square Ventures and chair of the capital campaign that's raising $40 million in private funds to support CS4All, couldn't be here in person today, but I'm excited to screen a short video of my conversation with him from earlier in the week. Let's get it started. Thank you again for being here. All right, good morning, Fred.
Jonathan.
So thanks so much for being here. You were one of the catalysts, if not the chief catalyst, for the creation of New York City's Computer Science for All initiative. In fact, it's nearly a decade now since you started CS NYC, and along the way, you've been leading the capital campaign to support CS4All. Why is this effort so important for New York? Why is it so critical to bring computing education to all public school children?
I think it's not so much about getting access to higher quality career opportunities, although that is certainly an important piece of it. I think it's about learning how to think in a more logical way, and to be able to deal with abstraction a little bit that a lot of students really struggle with. And in the world that we live in now, it's just becoming more and more important for any adult to be able to handle what we might consider as computer science-like issues. And it might be just as simple as how to teach your iPhone to, ring when you're at work during the day and not ring while you're asleep at night. That's, pretty common thing we all need to do, but it requires a human instructing a machine. And ultimately, that's what computer science is all about. It's teaching humans how to instruct machines.
Right. And I know you mentioned this, but obviously a big part of it is also that we need to expand access to tech careers. And tech is not just the tech sector, but all facets of the economy. This is a really important skill, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I got to this, although I've come to realize that there's actually a bigger reason to do this than just the jobs piece. But, going back 15, 20 years, New York's tech sector has had a voracious appetite for talent, particularly technical talent. And a lot of that technical talent is getting hired outside of New York, oftentimes outside the United States, and being brought here. And yet we have all of these young people who are growing up in New York, and so few of them actually are finding a pathway to these high-paying, high-quality jobs. And so it was that sort of mismatch that first got me here, and obviously that's still a big piece of it. The companies that I work with say we want to hire more diverse workforces. They really want to do this. It's not like lip service. They really want to do it. Then they go out and they say, okay, how are we going to hire, half of our software engineers, we want to be black and brown in the next 5 years. How are we going to do that? And the how is the hard part. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's that the pipelines aren't really there. And so, we have to make those pipelines much more, much bigger. And so that's all about getting more people who are underrepresented in the tech sector trained in the skills that one would need to be able to access those jobs. And so that's obviously a fundamental piece of why we're doing this. But I just wanted to be clear that I don't think it's the only thing.
Got it. So let's talk about the program. I mean, it's impressive. It has been around for almost 10 years now, and I'm curious, what do you think is next for computing education in New York? Do you have any specific advice for the mayor or Department of Education officials for how to build on what we've already accomplished with CS4All and ensure that more young people have foundational computing skills?
Yes, absolutely. And when we started this, the biggest problem we had was if we want every student in every school building, call it 1,700 school buildings in New York City, to be able to have a computer science education, well, that means we would need thousands and thousands of teachers in each and every, 2, 3, 4, 5 in every building to be able to offer a computer science class, either a module inside an existing math or science class or a homeroom class, or a full-blown like intro to computer science or an AP computer science class. And so the initial problem was how to get 5,000 teachers trained up on how to teach computer science. And so it seemed like the best thing was to go to the teachers that were already in the buildings and say to them, hey, we're going to offer professional development. We're going to help you learn how to teach an intro to computer science class, or do a Scratch module in your homeroom class in your second grade homeroom, or whatever the thing is that teacher might need to do. And so that was the genesis for Computer Science for All. And the idea was to train over 10 years, 5,000 teachers who were already in the buildings how to teach a computer science class or a module. 8 years in, we've train close to 4,000 teachers, and we will end up having trained a very, very important subset of all the teachers in the New York City school system on how to do this. But I think that for this to work long term, and this is sort of getting into where do we go from here, I think we have to go back to the traditional model that the teaching colleges that prepare people to go out in the world and become teachers need to take on the role of teaching people how to be computer science teachers. First step had to be to take the in-service teachers and get enough of them trained up. We're almost there now. What we need to do now is we need to get a pipeline of new young teachers coming into the school system who know how to do this. And ideally, every teacher who graduates with a master's in teaching should know how to teach a computer science module. Some of them maybe just a scratch module in an elementary school classroom if that's what they're headed, or they want to be a high school teacher, how to teach an intro or AP class or something like that. But I think every teacher who comes out of a master's program, in teaching should have some capability to teach computer science. And we're not there. We're not, frankly, even close to there. There's a really ambitious project at CUNY that our family foundation called Gotham Gives is funding, along with Robin Hood and Google and a few other funders, that will begin to start that happening. And CUNY is obviously a huge source of teachers into the New York City public school system. So I'm very, very excited about that effort. And I think it's an important initiative, and the kind of thing that I think we need to see more of in the evolution of it. Because to have the Department of Education be involved in the training of teachers, to me, was kind of a hack. We had to come up with some way to get this thing going. But that traditionally has not been the Department of Education's role. The Department of Education's role has been more about operating the schools, managing the schools, leading the schools. The teacher training has happened in the schools of education. And so long term, I think we want to go back to that model where the DOE focuses on making sure that the superintendents and the school leaders are aware of how important computer science education is for their students, and the actual training of the teachers happens in the traditional model. And so that's my hope, is where we go over the next decade would be to really flesh out how that all works.
It does almost seem like the low-hanging fruit to kind of focus on folks before they get into the system, to give them those foundational teaching skills so they can translate it to students in their classrooms. But I do want to just ask you, you mentioned that at those programs, for instance, at CUNY, to provide incoming teachers with some sort of computer science background. But is it critical that we give them that computer science background, or should we be thinking more broadly about computing education, computational thinking?
I prefer to use the word computational thinking, because if I'm a homeroom teacher and my second grade class is doing a Scratch module, I don't really need to know how to write software myself. I just need to know how to guide my students through that journey that they're going to go through. Really, Scratch is a really fun environment. You basically get an existing Scratch program that, it's visual and it looks almost video game-like. And then, it's like, okay, you're going to make these people's clothes green instead of blue, or we're going to have them go left instead of right? And so it really helps the kids kind of learn a little bit of like how to instruct the machine, and then see, oh, wow, I did it, and it seems so trivial, but it's actually, I think, really fundamental and important. You don't need to be a computer scientist to be able to lead something like that in a second grade homeroom class. I think if you're going to teach, AP computer science, which is the Java based AP test, I think you're going to have some comfort with computer science. So to me, it's a continuum. Some teachers will not need to know much. Some other teachers will actually need to be reasonably skilled in the material.
Last question, just again, kind of following up, so if we're going to get to what you're talking about and kind of take CS4All or computing education to this level that you're describing. What would you love to see the mayor do, the city council, Department of Education officials? Also, I'm curious what you think that the private sector ought to be doing to support this.
Well, that's a big question. The mayor has been very supportive of this. I remember when he was the Brooklyn Borough president, he and I went out to a school in Brooklyn together and watched a kindergarten class. And these were not even native English speakers. These were Spanish speaking kids, for the most part, participating in a Computer Science for All class. And yeah, he understood, like, I could tell in what he said to the students and what he said to me, he really got it, how important this is. So he's been a supporter for a long time. You know, look, the mayor doesn't completely control what happens in our schools because, you know, a lot of the policy is set in Albany. And so, you know, it's going to be a combination of what the city wants to do and what the state wants to do. But what we ideally want to see happen is a mandate that every kid who graduates from high school in New York State and New York City has shown some level of mastery of computer science. We require that for math. We require that for science. We require that for history. We require that for English. We do not require that for computer science, and we should. It is absolutely a fundamental life skill to be an adult in society, is to have some understanding of how humans can control machines. Because if we don't teach humans how to control machines, the machines are going to control us. And we're not that far from that. You know, so we've got to teach people how to control machines. And so what the city should do and the state should do is they should mandate that computer science education, some level of computer science education should be, there should be some mastery of that for everybody who graduates from high school in New York State and New York City. That would go a very long way because it is so hard to run a school in New York City, particularly the schools in the toughest neighborhoods, that those school leaders are making triage decisions every single day. And if there's something that they don't have to do, they're not going to do it. So they gotta keep their kids fed. They gotta keep their kids safe, right? And so a mandate would be, in my mind, an amazing thing. But the mayor can't do that. That's gonna have to be something that the state and the city would have to decide together to do. So that would be my dream. I'm not counting on it anytime soon. You know, everything that we're doing and all the stuff I talked about that we've done and that we're gonna do doesn't require a mandate, and we'll keep going. But that to me would be the thing that would be the most powerful thing of all. And for the tech sector, we just need to continue to have the tech sector engage and be available for class visits. When a class comes to a software company and they see what those jobs look like and they see what those people look like, they're like, oh, I could go get that job. And it definitely opens their mind to, hey, there's something out there that I might want to go do. So we have the Computer Science Fair, which we put on every April. And, you know, we want to do more of that kind of thing. And the mayor and the chancellor are very focused on a pathways initiative to get more students to have internships. And the tech sector needs to be deeply involved in that. So there's a lot that the tech sector can do to support this work. And, you know, some of that is happening, more and more of that's happening every year. And, you know, another part of what I do is to try to make sure that the tech sector understands what's going on in the schools and is excited about supporting it.
Back to the city and whether it's the council, the mayor, you said there's limited things they could do, but what about this kind of pre-service CUNY program that you've personally supported? That does more investment need to happen to kind of help get more of our teachers before they come into the system prepared to teach computational thinking?
Look, more money would be very useful if the city council and the Adams administration could make more money available for CUNY to do the teacher training stuff and to the DOE to support the superintendents and the school leaders more. Yes, money, absolutely. More money will absolutely help. But it's not just a question of money. It's also a question of commitment and trying to help the people who run these schools understand how important this is and make the changes they need to make in their buildings, in their daily schedules, and in what's made available to the students. So, you know, some of it's money and some of it's just the will to do it and making it a priority.
Well, Fred, this was amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks for your deep commitment to this project.
Great, thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. Well, welcome anywhere. I guess we could have planned this out to teach some, algorithmic thinking and how we took our seats, and we failed on that opportunity, but we'll have a set of instructions next time. Well, welcome, everybody. So great to see everyone here. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Eli Dvorkin. I'm the editorial and policy director at the Center for an Urban Future. It's my pleasure to welcome this amazing group of panelists this morning. Let me begin by introducing all of you briefly, and then we'll get right into the discussion. And stay tuned. Right after this discussion, we'll move right into our second panel with Councilmember Rita Joseph, CUNY Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, and Robin Hood CEO Rich Bury. So let me begin by I'll start right to my left here with introducing Debbie Marcus, who may need no introduction in this room, but Debbie's the Senior Director of Breakthrough Tech, an organization working to propel more undergraduate women and non-binary students into technology degrees and careers. Prior to that, Debbie led computer science education at the Department of Education, and she founded the city's CS4All initiative. Welcome, Debbie. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're joined today also by Shanika Hope. Good to see you again, Shanika. Shanika is Director of Tech Education at Google. She is also a former elementary school teacher and principal, and previously led computer science content and research at Amazon, McGraw-Hill Education, and Discovery Education as well. Great to have you here, Shanika. We're also joined this morning by Tanisha Mitchell. Tanisha is currently CS4All's interim acting executive director. She's spent the past 6 years working with the Department of Education's computer science team to support school and district leadership development citywide. It's great to have you with us, Tanisha. Thanks for taking time. To her left is Ankit Patel. Ankit is the director of STEM education programs at CUNY, where he leads the development of computing learning opportunities for over 11,000 teachers in training. Prior to CUNY, Ankit led computer science academics for the CS4All initiative and led the design process that created the CS4All blueprint. And last, certainly not least, to my far left is Katie Knight. Katie is the executive director and president of Siegel Family Endowment, a New York-based foundation focused on understanding and shaping the impact of technology on society. She also serves on the boards of several local and national organizations, including CS4All nationally and my personal favorite, the Center for an Urban Future. Hey, Katie. Great to have you with us. So, Katie, let's cruise up to the 40,000-foot level for a moment, if you want to. I know you've been traveling a lot recently, so maybe you're spending a lot of time up there.
Yeah, I was just there yesterday.
Okay, great. Well, hope everything was okay up there, and we can bring our audience up there too. So, as we heard a little bit already this morning, we know that tech-enabled jobs are really powering middle and high-wage job growth in New York City. And despite headwinds right now, high interest rates, the cycle will continue, and these jobs will continue to grow. And more than just the jobs in the tech sector, we know now, a recent Cuff report showed that about 55% of all the job postings, this was in 2020, in New York City in the worst months of the pandemic, required digital skills. That is significant, and that is growing. So at the same time, we know we need to do a lot more to close these opportunity gaps in tech and beyond, in tech-powered jobs, and ensure that far more New Yorkers, people of color, women, and low-income New Yorkers are able to enter and succeed in these careers. So the question I have for you just as a starting point is, and it may not be entirely obvious to everybody tuning in, the 150 or 200 people online, folks in this room, why is it that strengthening CS4All and computing education at the K through 12 level is so essential for achieving these goals?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of reasons, and there's certainly, I think, to Fred's point, there's just a baseline understanding of computing and technology that you have to exist in the world as a productive citizen and individual. You have to be able to interact with technology in a meaningful way, and ideally in a way that demonstrates like a mastery and control of computing. I think tech-enabled jobs that require digital skills are not just in the tech sector, they're across the board. And there's something in particular about, I think, having that same baseline, knowing that all young people coming out of our K-12 system are actually equipped with the skills that they need to participate meaningfully in this economy, that makes a difference, I think, across the board. So it's not just the young people that are applying for the actual jobs that are listed, it's knowing that all of our students coming out of NYC schools are capable, right? Like, I think that's the power of CS4All being a mandate, potentially being something that is existing across all schools, is that we will be able to say confidently that all students have these skills, possess this knowledge, and are capable of doing this work. And I think rather than them having to demonstrate it and sort of face the barriers that come with sort of structural racism and classism and all the things that exist across the board in all work, but particularly in the tech industry for a long time, we need to be able to say that confidently. There's also, I think, just a real need to reckon with the forces around college and other post-secondary education, and having students come out of the 12th grade equipped to do work is important. I think as important as it is that we put all students on a pathway to the post-secondary sort of situation that makes the most sense for them, it's also important that we acknowledge that not every student will go to college, not every student will have the opportunity to develop these skills outside of the K-12 system, and so we need to be providing them with these fundamentals within the system so that they're ready to enter the economy if that's what they choose to do when they graduate.
That's really helpful, Katie. Thanks. Well, Debbie, let me bring you in at this point. In part because I think Katie really did articulate the part of the vision or the core behind launching CS4All in the first place. And we gave Fred his flowers earlier. I think you deserve yours as well. You were right there at the beginning, founding and launching this program. I wanted to ask you a little bit from your new perch, having maybe put your old hat on a little bit, but also being able to zoom out. What are the keys to success for CS4All as you see them? Baked in from the beginning in 2015, or maybe some of the lessons that you learned along the way that you think are most valuable now as we look at continuing and accelerating the work of CS4All, reaching those goals from set back in 2015. What has been the keys to success so far? And maybe most importantly, what needs to be the focus right now going forward to meet the full scope of CS4All's initial goals and maybe even to go beyond them?
Yeah, thank you. I think it was great to hear Fred talk, and thinking back when we started this in 2015, computer science was hardly taught in New York City public schools. We didn't even know where it was taught in New York City public schools. We had no way of even tracking it. And so from what we could tell, there were about 5% or less of students learning computer science education, and they were largely in the selective high schools, and they were largely white and Asian boys who were learning computer science. So we created this really ambitious goal of how do we go from that to every student in New York City public schools. And I think there's certain things that we got right in listening to where we are now and following what's happened even since I left. One is that, as Fred and Katie articulated, we could have just thought about computer science as the economic imperative for jobs and thinking about this as a high school initiative to get more folks trained to eventually be software engineers. But we really took a step back and thought about what is the world that our students are going to inhabit when they get out of high school. The world that our current kindergartners are going to inhabit 20 years from now looks wildly different, and it's going to be completely tech-enabled, and we need our students to understand how technology impacts their lives. We need them to be producers of technology and understand how to create and not just use. And so we thought about this as a K-12 initiative. That wasn't a given when we started. I think also having a real public-private partnership was integral in getting it off the ground, and the fact that we're still here having this conversation, it was incredibly important that we have folks inside the DOE who are setting priorities, who are working with school leaders, who are helping them figure out how to make it happen. That can really only happen inside the DOE. But we also had Fred and Robin Hood and other partners who are holding the whole system accountable for making this happen. CS4All survived a pandemic. It survived many chancellor changes. It survived a mayoral change. We're still here talking about it. That doesn't happen with a lot of things inside of the DOE. So I think it was really important that we had that 10-year vision. And so to be setting now, okay, what happens for the next 10 years is really important. It didn't just happen. We trained 4,000 teachers. We're good to go. There is obviously a lot more to do. And I think two other things that we really got right in the beginning that we can capitalize on now is the work that a lot of folks on this stage did with not just training teachers, but we collaborated with teachers to create our blueprint, to create our teacher training, and to make teacher leaders. So there are hundreds of amazing New York City public school teachers who are prepared, who actually are already training their colleagues and coaching their colleagues and supporting them. And that helps this actually keep going long beyond what their initial training was. And the other is working with school leaders. So teachers don't get to make decisions about what they teach necessarily, what grades they teach, what subject they teach, and they don't control who's in their classrooms. Those are school leader decisions. So just zooming in and training teachers and not stepping back and working with the school leaders about what are the core decisions we need to make computer science happen in the building is essential. And there was a recent evaluation report from the Research Alliance, which is the external evaluator for CS4All, showing that for schools that had multiple teachers come to training, that had teacher leaders and went to professional development for school leaders, they're the ones who are doing computer science, expanding it, and making it more equitable for all of their students. So that combination needs to be leaned into to continue the growth.
Well, let me follow up a little bit on that, Debbie, and I'll share a couple things just in terms of where we are now with CS4All from that most recent evaluation. To your point, there was a really positive correlation between having more than one trained teacher in a school and having that school persist in implementing CS4All and continuing to accelerate the implementation. It's pretty striking. Obviously, there's not enough computer science teachers to do that. That, I think, gets at the value of having that integrated approach, having many more teachers beyond just dedicated computer science teachers doing this work. There's some real success here, and Tunisia and your team, everybody deserves this credit. By 2021, 91% of schools in New York City were offering CS. That's up from 76% just in 2019, and up from very, very few, as Debbie said, 8 years ago. But at the same time, only 17% of schools were achieving the initiative's participation and equity goals. I think that gets at the real gap here. Schools, and this is maybe a little bit oversimplified, schools are offering computer science, but not all students are taking it, not by a long shot, or even having access to it necessarily. I think the challenge there is I want to kind of get at is, and maybe actually Ankit, let me turn to you on this because I think we just brought up this point about teacher training, to understand how you go from having most schools offering CS to dramatically increasing the participation and equity goals of CS, which seems like, although there has been progress, I want to be clear, but we're at 17% today. It strikes me that maybe the heart of that is getting more teachers beyond computer science teachers trained. Obviously, that's been part of this initial goal. We've reached, as Fred mentioned, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 teachers trained. Maybe Tunisia, you can let us know about that. But so there's ways to go just to reach the 5,000. But we've got 77,000 plus teachers in New York City's public schools. So Ankit, tell us a little bit more. First of all, is that the right approach, this idea of training teachers outside of our CS teachers? I think that may not be intuitive to everybody trying to understand this issue. How is CUNY doing that today? Why is that so important for achieving those equity and participation goals, for getting to the next phase of CS4All? How do you see CUNY doing that work going forward?
Yeah, so so your first question, like, what the approach of if we want to equitably reach all students and engage them in computing, do we approach that by having computer science courses, or are we looking to teach computing across the curriculum and give them an opportunity to see computing in context, see how it's used in math, see how it's used in science, how it's used in the arts, see how it's used in English class, and how it can help them better engage with texts. So we have these two different approaches, and I'm clearly on this side of integration into all these different subjects, because it immediately gives us an ability to, one, give students more at-bats with computing. They get to see it in a number of different contexts. They don't necessarily have to opt in to taking that CS course. This is at elementary level. This is during a time that they're already scheduled to receive instruction. If they're bilingual or special ed students, if that teacher is integrating it into their instruction, they're not missing it because they're being pulled out of a regularly scheduled course and to receive special services. And so if we take on this integration approach, there is a much larger sort of problem of how do we reach all of these teachers, and how do we reach these teachers where they're at. Teachers have to make a decision at some point of I'm going to be a teacher, and then what type of teacher am I going to be? Being a CS teacher is a big decision, and very few people are deciding to go that route. So what does that look like then, career option wise? What does that look like in terms of what they have to study? CUNY, so for example, I mentioned that we serve 11,000. We have 11,000 students enrolled in classroom teacher programs. The majority of those students are in childhood, early childhood, special education, bilingual programs. These are the types of jobs that those folks want. These are the types of people that the DOE is hiring. The DOE is hiring about 5,000 new teachers every year. See, the CS4All goal is to train 5,000 teachers over 10 years. And so, there's an opportunity to, if we're able to affect that pipeline, to like start making a real difference in many, many classrooms. CUNY students make up about a third of those annual hires. And so if we're able to, right now, it's interesting that you're saying that like when we started CS4All, when you started CS4All, less than 5% of schools were teaching computer science. I'd say probably less than 5% of CUNY students right now are prepared to integrate computing. And that's only because of pilot investment from the Robin Hood Foundation, Robin Hood Learning and Tech Fund 3 years ago, that it's not zero. So we have a long way to go to that, really 100% of CUNY teacher education graduates should be computationally literate, should be able to integrate computing into a range of different subjects so that students have this ability to kind of engage and to really feel like, if we're not doing this in CS class, we then give students and teachers an opportunity to feel like they belong in CS. Or maybe even, there's a better way to put it is that computing belongs to them. That this is a power that they have to achieve their goals, to make something that they're interested in, whether or not they see themselves as pursuing a STEM career, regardless of like what school they're going to or what language they speak or when they come to the country. If we're integrating computing in all schools, in all classrooms, we really have a power to reach all students in a way that helps them feel like computing belongs to them.
That's really helpful, Ankit. Well, Tanisha, let me bring you in on this and maybe take us into one of those classrooms. I think of everyone on this stage, you probably spend more time in a classroom or working with current teachers, maybe than most folks in this room. To help us understand the impact of this, what does that look like in a second grade class? What does that look like for a high school science teacher to become a champion of equitable computing education? And maybe not in an abstract sense, but help us understand from your own firsthand experience, what does that look like? How is that helping more students underrepresented in tech careers to be able to even imagine themselves taking those steps, to see themselves belonging to, or as Ankit's saying, actually taking kind of ownership over computing as something that can belong to them? How does that work in our schools right now, thanks to CS4All? Where would you like to see it go so that you can achieve those greater goals?
Thank you for that question. I think to start that off is making sure there is intentional exposure and access for computer science and computational thinking instruction. When we think about what it looks like in schools, it looks very different everywhere. And that's the beauty with schools, right? When you're a teacher, you ascribe to your students' needs. You understand that whatever subject area that you have a license in, you take that knowledge and you repurpose it to meet your students' needs so they can understand that instruction. And so when you think about computer science and computational thinking, in the elementary space, we have students who do a lot of unplugged activities. And when I say unplugged, that's without a computer, because you can do computer science without a computer. That actually exists, right? But it's also thinking about tinkering and exploring and understanding the world around them, right? And so some integrations, and we were talking about integration earlier, thinking about in English, and when you're talking about your story of self, how can you do that? What does that look like? Some of our students in elementary school, they do that with Scratch, and they start thinking how they can move their blocks over, and they talk about a story of them, and they talk about them from their perspective. And when you think about all the different students that represent in our system, a lot of this was actually a way to connect with other students. Not everyone speaks English. Not everyone speaks Spanish. Not everyone speaks every language that's in our system. But computer science is a language in itself. And when you think about that language and how you harness that technology, what does it mean to make those meaningful connections, and think about how you take that in the placement in this world is huge. And so when you think about elementary, when you think about middle school and high school, there's different ways of how you really do this work, whether it's by integration, by standalone courses, but really it's understanding how to utilize computational thinking to solve real world problems. Right, because that is what we want our students to do. We want them to understand the world around them, how to apply this knowledge, utilize it for themselves, and choose what they want to do with it. And so when you think about, what does this look like? It is so core It is so core to have intentional exposure and access. We talked about all of our students having access to computer science, but all of our students have different needs. All of our students come from different backgrounds. What does it mean that we make sure in our school, when we think about computer science, it's not just about the gifted and talented, right? And thinking about, okay, these students are high achieving. What does that even mean, right? When you think about these pieces, computational thinking is an essential skill. It's a life skill, right? And making sure that we're creating spaces that students are affirmed in that work and they see themselves in that work. They know about Jerry Lawson. They know about Joy Bulani. They know about all different aspects of people who are involved with computer science, so they too can see how they could be involved in computer science. I think we take a step in that direction. During Computer Science for All, we started with one-day PLs. We started with coaching schools, with our SEP program, and we really started to think about how to elevate that work and what does it mean to have deeper experiences with students and our school staff, right? Because it takes a community to move that work. We're still moving in that direction. We developed some amazing findings. We have CS access data to really help us think about not only us providing computer science in schools, but who is actually receiving that computer science and how do we support school leaders in creating a targeted plan in supporting all of our students and see proportionately, think about Black and brown students who is actually receiving versus having those high numbers of what Debbie talked about before of our white and Asian students, right? We want to flip that mode, flip that mindset, and making sure that they see that computer science is for everyone and creating intentional spaces to deepen that work for our students and also for the school communities that they reside in.
Thanks, Tanisha. Shanika, I want to bring in on this and maybe talk a little bit about what else is going on in the country today. I think in New York, we often do have a little bit of a bias. We think if we haven't had a good idea here, it doesn't exist. I really appreciate having you here for many reasons. That's one of them, is that you were a principal, a teacher principal, a school leader in the DC area and in DC as a superintendent. You've been at Google, but also working on projects across the whole country. I guess when I look at the full landscape, and Fred Wilson mentioned this, alluded to this a little bit earlier, more than half of all U.S. states right now have a requirement that CS be offered in high school. New York State is not one of them. About 5 states now actually have a graduation requirement in computer science, and that's up from 0 3 years ago. So there's clearly a lot of action happening across the country. I wanted to ask you, what do you think New York City can learn from other cities and states? What are you seeing out there that you think has been most successful in boosting computing education at the K through 12 level in general, and maybe specifically around equitable computing education?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I just want to start by saying I am thrilled to be on this stage with you all. Like, this is my tribe, my village. I could talk to all of you all day. I've learned a lot just listening. But I want to zoom out a little bit because we've been talking about the very important point that computer science and computing education should be universal, for sure. But just to locate why this matters, 5.3 billion people use the internet worldwide, global. 1.1 billion users came online in the last 2 years, 25% growth. So now we're at a place where almost 70% of the world goes online. They interact with a machine. And what that accelerated pace of digitalization is doing, it's changing the way that we live, work, and learn. And so because of that, to the point that Katie and Debbie and my colleagues have been making, is that this is now a basic skill for how we have to operate. And so this conversation is critically important because we have to ensure that our young people are equipped to live in the world that is around us. The other thing that's important to call out is I think we're in a pandemic or coming out of a pandemic. I'm not sure where we are in the pandemic, but the pandemic, right? The world is changing and it's coming, these changes are happening at a rapid clip. And so Fred made an important point about this idea that this is not just about jobs. Yeah, we want to unlock jobs. It creates economic upward mobility, et cetera, all important. But we have to equip our young people to lead this world as change is coming at them at a rapid way. So they need to think critically. They need to take all of these inputs in a way so that they can make decisions. And by the way, the tool of the trade is technology. And so they're using technology to take in information and to decision. And unfortunately right now, in particular in the US, we consume the tech, we use the tool to consume. What we need to do is to flip that so that our young people are now producers. And not just our young people, but specifically to the point that the US demographics are shifting, where the minority is now becoming the majority. So we're becoming more diverse. So the individuals that are building and creating technology should look like our communities. And that's the challenge that is in front of us. And this is why this conversation is so important. So when we zoom out, the challenge in front of us, and as we think about the work that we do at Google, is we're paying attention to the skill gap, digital skills, but we're also paying attention to something that Fred mentioned, which is that the pathway is not sufficiently supplied with leaders, individuals of interest that are diverse. And so it's both the path in, making sure there's a lot more diverse talent on the path, but then also the gaps of the skills. And so Eli's question, I promise I'm going to answer, which is proof points. What's working? A great case to pay attention to. So Brookings just recently released a report where they looked at 11 countries, states, regions worldwide to actually identify proof points. Can you guess the state that was highlighted as leading the way? It wasn't New York. Sorry.
South Carolina.
Arkansas. Now let's talk about why Arkansas was identified as leading the way. Starts with their governor, Governor Hutchinson, and he would say, I think, even before him, the state made a commitment that this is a skill set that we as a state have to declare as important. From there, they set up a state-level steering committee comprised of industry, teachers, leaders, public administrators, so public-private partnership that made up the steering committee. From there, they adopted statewide standards. I know it's hard to believe that learning standards are something that we should adopt, but why does that matter? Back to the point that Debbie made, teachers don't get a lot of choice about who's in the classroom, what they can teach, et cetera. So we have to identify the learning standards and be in agreement that we collectively will do that. So they adopt the standards statewide. Then from there, they made a commitment to train teachers. Not just train them, but they incentivized it. They gave scholarships. They gave money for teachers that raised their hand and say, hey, you know, I want to do that. So they got stipends to teachers. Coupled with that, industry raised their hand to give teachers the opportunity to do externships. So not only are they learning how to teach computational thinking and computing, but you got to go stand in with a Googler or a local partner for a few weeks to actually figure out, okay, so why does this stuff matter? And now, okay, this is what it looks like in real world. Okay, I'm gonna take it back to my classroom. Something else Arkansas did, high school graduation requirement. And not that you have to take a computer science class because that's what you have to do. They did it where they made it both a science or a mathematic credit. So they gave choice around how computer science could show up and apply towards graduation. And then finally, part of their secret sauce of success is that they tied it in with student internship opportunities. So students actually themselves got to translate their learning in an applied way back to jobs. So they got to see people that looked like them, they got to apply the skills, and then we got to magically answer that question, why am I learning this stuff? Because we need you to solve problems that don't have a playbook. And so that's Arkansas's secret sauce. Now I'm gonna show you the flip side of this. Brookings also studied a country that actually mandated computer science K-10. What's fascinating about that, so it was compulsory, K-10. By grade 11, how many students, when now a choice matters to students, so students can raise their hand, what percentage of students do you think still raise their hand to learn computer science by grade 11? Someone said 0. Good. Good, you're close. Sadly, you're close.
Yeah.
9% of students raise their hand to continue. Now, when they reflected back on this use case, what they found are a lot of things that you would expect. It was taught in a way that was like rote memory, like I have no idea, taught completely outside of like true application. It was taught in a way that sadly many of us get taught math, which is why there's no joy for math, right? So this country and this learning, please take a look at the Brookings study, just recently released. It's fantastic. But it has called together all of these practices. And by the way, these are things that we know, but we have to do it. We have to have bold courage, as Fred said. We have to have the courage to stay the course. And that's how Arkansas has been able to have now 50% of their teachers are taught statewide. There's 30,000 plus teachers in the state. 50% of them have been taught. Their demographics that they report as of 2021, 30% more girls identify and take computer science courses. And they've also gotten, now don't quote this particular number, but Arkansas talks about substantial increase with the CSA AP course completion by more diverse students. Take a look at Arkansas. I know it's stunning, New York. You can lead the way. You can. Take a look at Arkansas. So that's what I would point to.
I really appreciate that, Shanika. Thank you.
Of
Super
course.
fascinating. Katie, let me bring you back in on this, thinking about, let's bring this back to New York. And I would say even maybe focusing on New York City. We have now already heard a few things that are at the state's plate, and we can certainly talk about that more. But I know at Siegel Family Endowment, you've been doing so much to support specific programs, initiatives that are working on these opportunities in multiple ways here in New York City, nationally with the expansion of CS4All. But we know that to help scale the reach and impact of those programs that you're supporting and so many others that are doing this work right now in New York City, the government's going to have to do more. And I wondered if you could help us understand, from your point of view, what should the mayor of New York City, what should the city council, where should they be focusing their efforts, their energy, their time, and financial resources to expand on CS4All, to go beyond it in some of these ways that we're talking about, or others that you might think are equally important? What's the role of city government right now to kind of pick up these threads and run?
So I'm going to sit up straight to say this because I think it's a little controversial.
You're with the tribe. We're here.
Yeah, I'm here with us. I think so much of what's happening with CS4All and with computer science and computational thinking broadly, it tracks what's happening in education and in K-12 space in general. And I think sometimes we, in the CS space, kind of talk about our stuff as like aside from everything else that's happening in education. And so much of what we need and want to have happen, right, for out of the box thinking about the way that we do this instruction, for integration, for students to have more opportunity to see this work come to life, it tracks directly the things that we want to see change in education more broadly. And so I think the onus is on us a little bit to be more engaged in the conversation about what needs to change in schools across the board, period, about the way they are designed, the way they look, feel, the student experience, so that our CS goals can be achieved in the context of improving education, like broadly, giving teachers more freedom, creating opportunities for them to have the interactions with students that they want to be having, so that students leave the school every day sort of feeling good about themselves and equipped to enter the world and do great things. And we've got to encourage the city to not just think about how do we do better for CS, but how do we do better across the board? So that's what I want us to do, so that when we say, like, what is the city's responsibility, what can they do more of, they can do more to think about like the way that we can change schools, the way that we can unsilo funding so that programs that are, in and out of the school building can work better together, so that out of school time opportunities are more integrated with what's happening in the classroom during the day, so that students are not just locked into crappy classrooms where they're, maybe not even getting the sunlight through the windows, right? Like they can be having experiences out in the world, to work more collaboratively with industry, to pick up on some of the successes of programs that bring professionals into the classroom. We're facing a teacher shortage because teaching as a profession is not being valued in the way that it should be. And why would a person with an advanced degree and great skills and the ability to command a class. Like if you can command a classroom, you think that you can't go into a corporate workplace and do something? Like we have to be thinking about these things in tandem. And I think that's where there's a lot of power and potential for the city to play a role in reshaping the way education looks so that our CS goals and our computational thinking goals can actually have a shot at being achieved broadly.
Thanks, Katie. Well, I want to stay on this theme. I think really open it up to everybody. But Debbie, let me ask you about this as well. As Jonathan mentioned earlier, we had a report out just in the last couple of weeks focusing on leveraging CUNY as a major springboard into tech careers. And we wrote that report because we see the power and potential of CUNY. There's no institution better positioned to help more New Yorkers access these careers at scale than CUNY. But we also know that CUNY itself continues to have challenges around which students show up, first-time, first-year students, excited about, prepared to, inspired to pursue computing degrees. At the same time, the successes are there. Our report showed that more Black and Hispanic students at CUNY earned computing degrees than the total number of undergraduate degrees awarded by Columbia University last year. That is stunning, but we're still talking about a school, an institution, CUNY, that absolutely reflects the diversity of New York City in every possible way. But when we look at those students that are pursuing STEM and more specifically technology degrees, and even more so the students that are actually earning those credentials, while they are still remarkably diverse, we do still see that male students are overrepresented, that white and Asian students are overrepresented there, even at CUNY, as diverse as it is. The reason I bring that up, because of course that's your focus at Breakthrough Tech, but I want to ask you, and this mayor talks, I think rightly so, about upstream solutions consistently. Well, obviously the TOE is upstream of CUNY. We know that in order for more students to be able to pursue those degrees at CUNY, more needs to be done at the K through 12 level, and you, I'm sure, see this every day in your work at Breakthrough Tech. So I wanted to get your sense of, keeping the focus on the city for the moment. What would you like to see city leaders do next to help you in your work at Breakthrough Tech ensure that more students are coming into CUNY prepared, excited, inspired to continue in computing fields? How do we focus on that now? What should city leaders be doing to actually power the work that you're doing once a student gets to CUNY to make sure that far more show up there with this kind of basic level of computational fluency and excitement about these careers?
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking about Breakthrough Tech, where we work to get more women and non-binary students around the country into computing majors and into tech careers, and we partner deeply with CUNY. And I think there's two big things that we really still need to do in the K-12 system to help look at what happens in higher ed and into tech careers. One is that we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that everyone has fundamental exposure. So there's still a lot of work to do in high schools. I think high school is where it is still very much a choice. So who is choosing, opting themselves in, and what adults are opting students in to learn computer science in high school still has a lot to do to be more equitable in terms of race and in terms of gender. So we still get a ton of women coming to CUNY who didn't have exposure in high school, and we do a lot of work exposing them to let them know that this is a choice that they might want to continue on in their future. But I think as everyone's talked about integration, as we help women who are in tech get into tech careers are in every sector. And so in thinking about what is applied computing, it is in finance, it is in fashion, it is in healthcare, it is in entertainment, it is in traditional tech companies, although they're not having a particularly good month with jobs right now, so it's good that we have the other sectors. And that students don't necessarily know that, so they're not just seeing that applied computer science integrated into their passions, their identities, who they are and what they want to be, that is something they should start learning in, K-12, but especially in high school, to see how all of these things actually come together. So this conversation, though it's opaque about standalone computer science or integrated computer science, you both need to understand the fundamentals of computing, but computing isn't in a vacuum. It is to solve problems in every other field, in every other content area. And I think what Katie talked about in terms of school, we don't function in the world in 40-minute blocks where now we're going to think about math and now we're going to think about English. Our world is integrated, and computer science is pervasive. So as we've learned to teach writing across the curriculum, we really need to think about computing across the curriculum, because it matters, and then it helps folks see themselves in it when it becomes part of who they are and what they want to do, and it's not this side project. I think it is all really related. And now that we're 8 years into CS4All, there's more opportunity for everyone to actually understand that than there was when we started this, when people were like, computer science, what? Like now there's really, I think, the energy and the opportunity to make that integration across the curriculum more impactful.
I appreciate that, Debbie. Well, Ankit, let me ask you a similar question, thinking about what the city can do next. I was really struck by what you said about, prior to the current initiative at CUNY, the number of teachers actually getting that kind of pre-service training in computing education was really minimal. These are a third of our future teachers, that you're talking about, and I'm really struck by the work that you're already doing. But I want to ask you, for city leaders tuning in right now, folks thinking about this, can they support this work? What's next, or what's needed? Obviously, you're just in some ways getting it going, but it strikes me that there's still so much more opportunity for that model to grow. You're also, as much as CUNY's 30% or more of those future teachers, that means that there's 70% that aren't coming through CUNY. How can more of those teachers get access to this kind of pre-service training? What would you like to see the city take on to help support this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really two things. One maybe seems like something that city can't affect change in, and that's like a paradigm shift in CS4All, the one that we've all been sort of talking about, and that instead of trying to change everybody to fit CS, we need to change CS to meet everybody where they're at. So how do city leaders affect that type of paradigm shift? Well, I think if we want to broaden participation, then we need to broaden participation. And the work that we're doing at CUNY, the Computing Integrated Teacher Education Project, is working with faculty. Over the next 4 years, we're going to work with over 200 faculty. And these are folks these aren't CS folks. These are teacher education. These are social scientists. These are linguists. There are mathematicians that are focused on math education. So how do we engage those faculty? Like we have a plan for the next 4 years. 200 faculty, though, is, let's say we meet our goals and exceed our goals, we're still just like less than 50% of the total faculty that are preparing future teachers at CUNY. So, all of those faculty deserve a chance to sort of understand computing, how it affects the way that they're preparing future teachers. They need to have opportunities to redesign curriculum, to do research, to work with our partners at the DOE to understand how this works in the classroom. And that sort of leads me to my second point, that if we're able to invest in CUNY and faculty, then we also need to think about how this works together as a system. And so 3 years ago, when I left the CS4All to come to CUNY, a large reason was because there was no way for me to influence what was happening at CUNY, being at the DOE. And now we're sitting up here together. We have the DOE supporting our initiative. We're working together. One of the ways that we're working together is providing this 6-credit micro-credential for in-service teachers. They can take 6 credits of computing, of courses either in computing or computing integration. A lot of these courses have been designed by faculty participating in our initiative. And this provides, this supports faculty, but it also supports these in-service teachers. It creates a connection between, CUNY is not this monolith, right? There's 15 colleges in CUNY that prepare teachers. These are community colleges as well as 4-year institutions, and they're all really important actors in CUNY, but they're also really important members of their communities across the city. So how can they connect with local schools, with the actual buildings, create opportunities for pre-service teachers, future teachers to do student teaching in some of these buildings where CS4All is happening, or where teachers have taken this micro-credential? If we fund these types of opportunities, right now that micro-credential is tuition-free. That's funded by federal relief money. That will end. So how do we keep that type of work going? Give in-service teachers an opportunity to kind of back up. Right now they do 100 hours maybe, or somewhere between 30 and 100 hours of professional development. It's really focused on getting ready for the next day. This is like in the summer, I'm learning curriculum, and then I'm going to implement it in the fall. And then where we'll have Saturday PDs, they have to take their Saturdays off, and they're just a little bit ahead of their students, and they don't really have an opportunity to understand the power of computing, how it really affects their teaching. They don't understand how they can potentially apply computational thinking to break down a math lesson or science lesson, or even to better engage with new texts. And so I think if we are able to empower our faculty and really connect them to the DOE system, connect CUNY to the DOE in meaningful ways, we could sort of have a more sustainable systemic solution.
Thanks, Ankit. Tanisha, I want to ask you something similar, but really focusing on how we get to the goals of 2015. Help us understand, where should we be focusing our energies now? And I say we, I mean, where should city officials, leaders be focusing their energy, their time, their resources? What specific gaps do you think are most apparent to you right now in terms of this is where we need to be focused to make sure that we do reach the initial goals. We want to talk about going beyond those goals again too, but I want to make sure we understand what are the needs right now to achieve those initial goals, and where would you like to see focus in the months and years ahead?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I want to answer that question by first starting about what we actually have. What we have right now is amazing dedicated staff at the DOE and a chancellor who actually thinks about what are the real skills that we need to infuse for our students. And with that, we develop a lot of different integration models, whether it be thinking about Scratch that we talked about earlier, but for elementary, middle school, high school, we have robotics, we have data science, we have software engineering, we have all different types of ways that you can involve a computer science. We have programs for our teachers so they can learn whether they're new to CS, whether they know CS. We have programs for our school leaders. We work with superintendents. These are things that we have now. Thinking about what we need to do is how do we upskill some of that work, right? So just because we meet with school leaders doesn't mean that we're creating structures that are streamlined. That way, when Debbie has left, and I'll keep left, and one day I might leave out the nest, maybe one day, but in making sure that no matter who sits in this seat, the work is here to stay, right? And so what does that look like to create those processes and align what we're doing at DOE so there are pipelines connected into the DOE for that structure? And so some of our work that Ankit was just talking about with micro-credentials, it's really thinking about that in-service, but another wave of this is thinking about pre-service, right? How are we building up the talent coming into the DOE to make sure that when we are meeting and supporting teachers, we already have a system in place to help them get there, right? Making sure when we are working with our students, what we have now, thinking about with Pathfinder students, we created structures that allow our students not only to learn computer science in the classroom, but how they can actually do that work outside the classroom with internships and meeting with other industry. Thinking about with Google, we have that with Google Desktops. There's so many different pieces that are integrated with our work. But we need to continue to upskill that work and deepen the scale of those experiences and make sure that there are alignment across DOE, K-12, higher ed, BCOs, thinking about our public-private partnerships of what serve us so well with CS4All. How do we connect those pieces? That way there is a through line for our students, for our staff to continue to move this work. The village isn't built in a day, right? And we just talked about Arkansas, which I think is a really great example of this work. Think about CS4All. There's so many strides. We had 3 schools that made up about 50% of who took the APCS exam in 2015. 3 schools. And I think y'all can guess who those schools are. Any guesses? You got one? You got one? Oh, there you go. There you go, right? And we have the Brooklyn Tech, right, exactly. So we know the schools. We know the schools. When we think about in 2019, we had 42.6 identified females who actually took the APCS exam, when the nation average was at 29%, right? And so just thinking about those pushes, when we think about our students who are Black students, we had about 15% who took that APCS exam. Nationwide, 5%, right? And so when you think about these pieces, they're moving. We still have a lot more to go. We talk about that mandate piece. We need leadership. We need DOE. We need mayor. We need everything, but we need an interconnection of all. And I think when we talk about mandate, we can mandate something, but when it is truly integrated and embedded, that's where the joy of the work lives. And so if we can continue to see how we can make that fight together, find the joy of computing, because there is joy in computing. I don't want it to be, like you said, with math. I love math, by the way. But I know there's connotations, right? People think computer science, oh, that's too hard. What do we do with computer science, right? And we got to change that mode, because computer science is all around us. We all have phones. Someone designed the apps on these phones, right? And how do we make sure that our students see themselves in this work? Our staff are empowered to support our students in this work, and we're creating structures that last to support the system, so no matter who sits in this seat, when we are thinking about K-12, there are connections with CUNY and higher ed, there's connections with BCOs, and they're making those through lines and students see themselves. So when I think about the next steps with this work, it's making sure that we continue with this amazing panel to align together how we make those through lines and make sure that our students are affirmed and the staff that equip the system, they know how to work together to move this work.
Thanks, Tanisha. Let me ask something for all of you. It's actually a little bit going off of my notes here, but it's something that you've inspired me to ask about, Tanisha. I'm thinking about, in general, what was maybe one experience that one or two of you may have had that did spark joy, that did spark your interest, your passion for this topic? Maybe we can learn something from that. But maybe more specifically, I think about some of the great work that I have seen recently. The Minecraft tournament at DOE, the folks in the room may not know about, but I found really inspiring. I actually was able to tune in live by accident on ESPN, and saw these are DOE. These are K through 12 students in our schools. There was a middle school that actually was going head to head with the high schools, and they did really well. It was really exciting to see that. But are there other concrete examples there? I'd love to hear a little bit from some of you about your own personal story there. What is that thing that sparked it? But more to the point for this conversation, are there other things a little more outside the box that city officials should be looking at and thinking about? Hey, these are the kinds of experiences that we need to be making available, that we need to be expanding on, because it's exactly those sorts of opportunities or experiences that do spark that joy, that get young people to see themselves pursuing this a little down the road. Alka, I'm looking at you too, because I know that you've thought a lot about what are those kinds of activities, enrichment opportunities. Maybe it's thinking bigger, system-wide activities like that Minecraft tournament that could help us get there. And really, this is a question for everybody, Shanika as well. Maybe it's examples that you've seen elsewhere that are getting at that ability to spark joy. And I'd love to open this up to all of you.
I mean, I'd love to talk about while I was at the DOE, we had this open data hackathon which ended in the first ever hackathon at City Hall. That was really amazing. There was middle school and high schoolers presenting to city council members and other city leaders. And they had just sort of built their own, they had explored community problems based on open data. And kind of built their own solutions, and they may have included computing, they may have not. But I should highlight something from CUNY, something that is just a personal aside. This past summer we had been planning to work with 50 faculty, and when we put out this call to we want to work with you to figure out how computing is relevant and valuable to teacher preparation. That resonated. We had over 100 faculty participate, which was overwhelming. And I I'm thinking about just that. That just gave me a lot of joy to see how valuable teacher ed faculty thought this was to their work. And then I could highlight one specific faculty member who has a longtime CUNY professor, bilingual education, specifically focusing on literacy, who started out being connected because of other faculty that she knew were connected and connected to my team, but was skeptical about whether computing would really be relevant to her work, but was willing to give it a shot. And now she's working with a really fascinating, brilliant CS Ed researcher who looks at how we can plot the way that plots in books are kind of evolving based on the characters that are involved throughout the book, or what words that they're using. We sort of engage with books in this new way, and she's challenging now to include Spanish texts. She sees this as a way for her students to better understand the texts that they may give assigned in their classrooms. She's seeing this as an opportunity for her students to really be able to break down and understand the process that their students will go through in learning, building their literacy skills. And this is applied computing. It's being used not for the purposes necessarily of teaching these K-12 students about for loops and conditionals and those types of things, but really how computing can help them do something really fascinating and interesting with literature. This is the type of experience that you just I think when we started CS4All, we didn't expect to be at this point where that's what we want to see. We don't want to see necessarily a bunch of students sitting there and learning how to use a programming language. We want them to kind of have a desire to I want to understand this thing in my life better. I want to understand this book. I want to understand how that math works. I want to explore a community problem, and computing is a tool for me to use it. And that's this faculty member really we were able to get her there because we started with her values, the things that she cared about, and And that there's just like gives me a lot of joy that computing is that she now wields it as a tool, that she sees the power of computing as hers, and it'll go well beyond any of our initiatives and the work that we're doing.
Yeah,
like to-
Eli,
No, please.
I'd love to respond there too, to this idea of joy, like what's created joy. And so, part of our work and quite frankly, even my work outside of Google is to really to deeply understand the why. And I for me personally, this work that I do is not just professional, but it's also personal because I benefited directly from someone leaning in. But when you look at the research, and this is global research, Gallup recently just put out a report back in 2020 where they actually surveyed thousands of women and thousands of individuals of color. But then you also look at there's some research that's by Ebony McGee out of Vanderbilt. She wrote Black, Brown, and Bruised, where she followed cohorts of diverse individuals that persisted through the academic computing plus academic experience. The common thing with a lot of the research, but in particular the research that leans in on women and BIPOC individuals that persist, there are two commonalities to their joy and their persistence. What do you think it is? Representation? Yeah, that's a good one. Mentors. The first thing was that there was a teacher or a parent that told them they could do it and they belonged. Mm-hmm. There was someone that gave them voice, that gave them a sense of identity and belonging. That's my story. So that's number one. The second one, which is representation, is actually tied back into this idea of a community. So they had a community that they tied into, that gave them the energy, gave them the encouragement so that they could persist. So when you think about joy, and I think this is even outside of computing, this is life probably. You need someone that identifies your greatness and says you can, yes you can. And then you need to go back to a community that dusts you off. I know you got a D, again, my world, a D in one of my computing classes in undergrad. Go try again and learn from that.
Right.
That's the commonality that has helped individuals persist, in particular individuals of color or individuals that identify as women, persist through computing.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead,
Can
Debbie.
I jump in on that too?
Absolutely, yeah.
You asked about moments that both sparked joy and got us into this. Before CS4All, we had a software engineering pilot program where we were trying to figure out, can we actually bring computer science education to existing schools with existing teachers? What does that even look like? So we started training teachers in 20 middle and 20 high schools from all different subject areas. So we had math teachers, science teachers, art teachers, special education teachers. And it wasn't a given that we could actually teach those teachers how to teach computer science. That's where we sort of learned the genesis of what became CS4All. And for me, the thing that sparked was watching their joy. Watching teachers get to learn something new and add to their practice and learn something new in a totally different way, where we thought about computer science as creative, as hands-on, as integrated into real-world problems. And teachers got to think about their practice in a totally different way. And those teachers were learning alongside their students, which is terrifying, but also really empowering. And they loved it. And many teachers who were veteran teachers saying, this has reinvigorated my interest in teaching. Mm-hmm. This has made me think differently about the field and made me want to stay. And some of the most interesting ones were not the teachers who we thought, the math and science teachers, but listening to especially our art teachers, remember, and our special education teachers, are, especially for me, I'm a parent of students with disabilities, and they're talking about what their classrooms look like. They were in integrated classrooms, and that their special education students were teaching their gen ed students, and that they were succeeding in different ways and made them think about what their students were capable of and how they taught. And so watching their joy when CS4All came around, that we can actually do this. We can do this with all teachers from different backgrounds, and that this is possible, and we could bring joy to those teachers and change their practice as well. And I think we sometimes forget about that in the space.
Thanks so much, Debbie. That's really powerful. And on that note, I wanted to actually open it up to the audience. We only have a few minutes, but I really do appreciate everybody being here. We maybe have time for one or two questions. If you keep your question really brief, my colleague will come around with a microphone. Please just let us know your name if you're here with an organization, and please do try to keep your question brief, and we'll try to get to as many as we have time for. So throw your hands up. Let me see. There's one question right in the middle. Microphone will come on over. And if there's any other hands, let me know. We'll try to get as many questions in as we can.
Hi, is this on? My name's Michelle Varian. I own a design manufacturing retail store, so totally vertical. Happy to hear you guys talking about, integrating computers into everything. Like, because, my business is not a tech business, but we use tech every day, intensely. So I'm happy you guys are addressing that. But the other thing I'd like to ask about, which you guys haven't mentioned, is access to Wi-Fi and devices. Like, how many New York City students do not have that? And how does that get addressed? I'm from Detroit, where that's a major issue, so curious.
I wrote about this when the Internet Master Plan was canceled. It's a problem, and it's within our means to solve it, and it's unacceptable that it's not. And I think that's just like, that those are facts. It's unacceptable in this city, the amount of wealth that we have with the access that we have. We have what I refer to as like the last 400-foot problem, which is like we have the fiber infrastructure, we have the cable, we have everything that we need, except that last, getting it into the apartment, getting it into a person's home at a rate they can afford, making it possible for people to sign up for the subsidized internet programs without having to access the internet to do so. Like, we're not doing the very simple things that are required to make it possible. I think we did, with a really better than expected job during the pandemic at getting access and devices into the hands of young people. And that's one of those things where I'm talking about like de-silo programs and funding. Like, libraries are doing a great job with internet access. There are programs across the city that are doing the hard work that like I think the city can step in and do. And schools in particular are an access point for this information about whether or not students have access in their homes. And we are not leveraging that like really rich data that we have. And we're really, really getting far away from the point that I think was a high point in terms of like understanding the need for access and devices and Wi-Fi and all of the things. And we're gonna blow this opportunity to make sure that this isn't something that we're just like, oh, when kids need Zoom school, like we care about whether or not they have Wi-Fi. They need it to turn in their homework. They need it to exist outside of the classroom. Like, it is, again, completely unacceptable that we haven't solved this problem.
Hey, thanks for the question. So just see the hands up again. We have time for one or two more. So right on the end there, just right behind you. Yep, right there. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Robin Glassberg, and I train teachers. And I'm just curious, you mentioned I like the integration process a lot, but I was just curious, for schools that are low income and don't have physics teachers or chemistry teachers or AP classes, how do you then manage to get the computer science across the board and integrated when there aren't even any of these AP opportunities?
We should talk. I have a lot of resources for you.
Yeah.
I could go on, but I'm happy to connect with you. And there's a lot of ways for this to be, computing to be taught in subjects that are, not physics and chemistry. So yeah.
That's great.
That's
right,
just.
You guys mentioned that was one way that things have changed, so I was just curious. I know you do through literacy, you do through math.
Yeah, it does require teachers that are trained, that understand how computing can be used in those fields. I don't know if, Tunisia, you want to talk about AP training?
I was just going to say, we can also talk because there's so many different approaches for this, right? And all of our schools come from different spaces, right? There are some schools that, let's say, have a really strong parent and engagement programs and other funding, and other schools that do not. And I think we could clearly say that, right? And thinking about those pieces as CS4All, we have a range of ways to help train teachers, right? And we provide resources, curriculum, free curriculum, and training for our teachers. But aside from that, I think there's other pieces in thinking about that pipeline of what we need to do stronger with, right? And just finding those teachers for those schools. There are gaps. There are gaps, and we are addressing those gaps and working together with that. Some of the pieces that we talked about today and thinking about the in-service, but also thinking about pre-service, right? And how do we support that pipeline and bring it into those schools? So it's not an exact science. We're working on it. There are things that we're doing now. There are things that we could be better with. But just as Anki said, let us talk, because I would like to hear what's happening on your end so we can see how we can support you.
Well, thank you, Tunisia. I think on that note, there'll be much more conversation to come, but we do have to end the first panel here. So please, everyone, if you could join me in a round of applause for our amazing panelists. Thank you all so much. And don't go anywhere. We're going to move right into our second panel. If our three esteemed guests could join me on the stage, that would be fantastic. Right into our second discussion. Just great. Thanks for doing this. Anywhere you like, absolutely.
Maybe go first.
Yeah, that sounds great. I like the sound of that. Hey, Chancellor.
What's up, sir?
Turning fist bumps into hugs, I like that. Oh, hey, how are you, Councilmember? Great to see you. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. As everyone gets settled, let me just begin by introducing our amazing second panelists. First, let me begin by introducing in the middle, in the hot seat, as the Chancellor put it.
That's what it was.
Councilmember Rita Joseph. It's so great to have you with us. Councilmember Joseph chairs the Committee on Education in the New York City Council, where she represents Flatbush, Prospect Lefferts Gardens, Kensington, Ditmas Park, parts of Southern Crown Heights. I hope I didn't leave out any great Brooklyn neighborhoods. Previously, the council member was a teacher for many years at PS6 in Brooklyn, where among many accomplishments, she secured hundreds of thousands of dollars for technology improvements. Thank you so much for being here today, council member.
And you forgot to say where she got her degrees.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I would say a proud alum as well. Absolutely. Well
Just
represented.
Say. Just say.
Thank you, fellow.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. On that note, representing the City University of New York, we're so pleased to have Felix Matos Rodriguez, the Chancellor of CUNY, the nation's largest urban university. The Chancellor knows his way around CUNY pretty well at this point, I would say, having also previously led Queens College and Ostos Community College in the Bronx. He's also the co-chair of the New York City Regional Economic Development Council and serves on the boards of numerous nonprofit, civic, educational, and human services organizations. Chancellor, welcome. It's great to see you again.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And it's also my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Richard Bury Jr. Rich is the CEO of Robin Hood, the New York City's largest poverty-fighting organization. Rich previously served as deputy mayor for strategic policy initiatives, where he was the key architect of New York City's Pre-K4All initiative, launched Schools Out NYC, managed the city's relationship with CUNY as well. Rich also worked for or led 4 major nonprofits, the Brennan Center at NYU, KIP, Children's Aid, and Achievement First. And it's so great to have you here, Rich. Thank you so much for being here. So, Rich, I'd like to start with you, and I appreciate putting on the specs for this portion of the conversation.
I can't see.
It adds,
Otherwise, it's all a blur.
adds a little flair and a little gravitas, too. But, so there is something like clear consensus in New York City among city government leaders that the city needs to take bold, new, and continuing action to close opportunity gaps in our economy today, to expand access to technology-powered careers. And there's a lot that can and should be done. And Jonathan mentioned some of those things earlier, from supporting and scaling up effective workforce development training programs to greatly expanding apprenticeship programs and pathways. But I think there's little doubt on this stage, or certainly on the previous panel, that K through 12 is so essential for achieving these goals. So help us understand why. Why, with all the different competing challenges and opportunities facing city leaders right now, why focus on strengthening computing education at the K through 12 level to help us solve for some of these challenges?
Oh, sure. First of all, thank you for having me, and thanks. I appreciate the center for your research and focus in this area. It's such important work, so really glad to be a part of this conversation. Well, I guess I would start from the beginning. As you said, you know, our city, like our nation, experiences severe and persistent gaps in opportunity, which are rooted in the history of racism, a history of underinvestment in communities of color, spanning every system, not only education, but housing, transportation. Our country has done an amazing job of finding ways to keep people of color separate and to keep them down. And so, this question is really a subset of that broader question. And so the same opportunity gaps that we see in every part of our world, we see in this part of our world. So look, this is important because so computer science, but more fundamentally, so computational thinking skills, the ability to solve problems using data, using computers or other tools, is so foundational, not just to New York City's economy, and of course, the tech economy, even with recent news, remains the fastest growing part of the city's economy. But it's critical to every job. I mean, I came in late at the end of the last session, but I heard folks talking about, you don't have to run a computer business to be looking for people who have computational skills, who are facile and fluent in how to use technology to solve problems. So certainly if we're thinking about how do we make sure that people who don't have access in this economy have access to the economy, you can't do that without making sure that young people have access to skills, computational skills. And of course, unfortunately, Black and Latino students are being left behind, as our children are often left behind. And so why K-12? It's in one answer, because it's all part of an ecosystem. The gaps that Phalo and CUNY have to manage they didn't start, in freshman year of college, right? They don't start in high school, they don't start in middle school. And there is so much research that introducing young people to this way of thinking in the earliest grades has a massive impact on their long-term achievement. And we also know that by the time you're in middle school, too many kids, Black kids, Latino kids, women, have already decided that this is not for them. Have already decided that it's too late for them. So in some ways, it's sort of the answer for everything. I mean, whatever skill you're talking about, you need to start early. And so K-12, and at Robinhood, we have a particular focus in the early grades in our Learning and Technology Fund. But you have to begin to introduce these skills in K-12. Otherwise, we're just creating a runway that is too hard to catch up.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate that. And Councilmember, let me bring in on this conversation in part because you have that classroom experience. You've been there, you've seen it for more than 2 decades. You were teaching at PSX. You've seen firsthand, I think, what works in the classroom, but also where resources or attention have been lacking. And you've advocated to close some of those gaps. And you've been a champion for the thoughtful integration of technology into schools. So I wanted to ask you, in your experience, what has been the impact of CS4All, which I think you've actually seen? But what do you think is needed now to help continue the process of expanding computing education to all New York City students?
It's more than onefold, as you said. I always look at the child as a whole. So, for example, when I entered my school, I went to school in PS District 22. So that's an affluent district that had all the resources. And when I started teaching in my district, I realized that a lot of the stuff I had access to, my students didn't have access. So I had to create that opportunity where they had access, and it also had to include equity. So I started teaching computer science in kindergarten. So my students now, my first cohort is about 31 years old. So that was my 3rd grade class. But a few years ago, when I started looking at technology, even way before the pandemic, and I was asking students, you have a computer at home? No. So I made sure I went out and I funded a computer lab, state of the art, where they can have access. If this is the only space they're gonna have it, I better have the best of the best. Created a STEM program for them, created a robotic program, coding, and when we couldn't do it during the daytime, we did it after school. But I made sure that it was integrated into the curriculum. I don't want us to think that this should be taught in silos or separate from the curriculums. It should be taught in everyday life. Everything you do is computer science. That Instagram, the algorithm, that's a computer scientist telling you how to create that algorithm. When are people gonna watch your post? So it should go into everyday life. So when the pandemic hit, a lot of the parents were like, Miss Joseph, at the time I was still Miss Joseph. Miss Joseph, what you taught my son, he's the one teaching us what to do now. So, and this was kindergarten, and it stayed with them. And one of your research papers I was reading, Robinhood, and it said that if you start in kindergarten, they will tend to go into that career field. And when I looked, and as a tech person, an undercover tech person, I was walking into rooms, there was no representation of me. There was no women. There was a woman of color that looked like me. So I created I had partnered up with Girls Who Code to do that after school in my building, and also partnered up with Google code.org, and I went to train. So these tools have to also make sure the fellow educators are also trained. Professional development for our teachers, and it shouldn't be separate. It should be for the teachers, and at one point, engage the parents. We always tend to leave them out. They're partners in this journey, this educational journey. They're also a partner in it. And as you said, there's a lot of ways that a lot of doors have been closed for young people. We can bring it down, especially Black and brown young people. And when I did research, I'm a little research person too, I saw that even in the domain-specific vocabulary in computer science, our community, Black and brown communities, are 5 years behind. Not even in the usage of computer science, but even the language. So that's very important where we bring all of these. That's what I meant. Like, it had so many different folds that you have to bring into this conversation. And at the end, for me, access and equity is where I am.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll talk about more of those
Yes,
strands and where we want to go with them.
That's why I'm in the hot seat, right, Philip?
The good seat.
But I do want to turn to the next seat over, Chancellor, and ask you about this as well. And I think as your colleague, Ankit mentioned on the previous panel, CUNY's right now training something like 11,000 teachers. We know that CUNY is the largest source of teachers, our future teachers into the DOE system. And with increasing turnover, which we heard a little bit about, with new state level standards, which have only been in place for computer science since the end of 2020, but also with some other challenges related to the pandemic, which have also come up today. It seems that the role for CUNY has become more important than ever. So help us understand, where is CUNY focusing its efforts right now when it comes to preparing our city's future teachers and cultivating that next generation in the classroom?
Well, again, thank you for the invite. Always a big fan of the work of the center, Jonathan, Eli. Although Eli, watching Minecraft on ESPN, we have to talk about your social life. This is. I mean,
in my defense,
was
Chancellor,
a little bit of oversharing.
First of all, it was ESPN2, so I got to be completely honest about this.
Okay, I'm just saying we have to talk.
I have a 2-year-old at home, so maybe that helps explain just a little bit. I don't get out much, but.
But also thank you for the first panel. You were extremely inspirational. So thank you so much for the work that you do, and it really inspires all of us in our different roles to continue to do more, and clearly to our funding partners. Without that, we wouldn't be able to do it. Robinhood, Google, the DOE. And I mean, this is a transformational initiative. I mean, this is one of the things that I have been excited about when it began, because I was then president of Queens College, right? That is one of the largest of the CUNY schools that, sends, teachers to the DOE. And also had at the time, the largest computer science department of any school, right? So I thought that the energy was there. So I have been supportive of this project since it was a pilot. The idea of having it been integrated into all kinds of disciplines, so the arts teacher, the gym teacher, the social studies teacher, I'm a historian, right? That everybody feels, right, that these skills are one of the fundamental, we talk about the critical skills that any liberal arts education should have, right? So this computational skills needs to be part now of that menu, and that you're doing that not just for the students who are good in science and tech, but it's really part of our broad education, and that possibly every CUNY student that is part of an undergraduate or a master's teaching program is going to be able to have this knowledge to be able to then take it to whatever discipline that they're doing. I think it's really, really transformational. I think it's also transformational in the work of our faculty, right? Because as we work with the faculty that are part of this training, right? It is not just the class that you're teaching in which you're doing this. All the other 3-4 classes you teach, you're going to take that, and it's going to transform how you do your other teaching in the School of Ed, and then you're going to have more colleagues. So the domino effect that has in terms of not just the initiative, but being totally inclusive, I think is transformational. We also, and this is sort of a full cycle, I am so looking forward also to seeing the generations of DOE students that are going to become CUNY students. We get about 70% of them are students in the system, and then to see them fully enjoy the menu of opportunities because they've been exposed to that. I mean, we talked about in the first panel it was addressed, how when you come as a freshman, you already have all these fears. You know, tech is not for me, and sometimes the pedagogy that we have in those classes then reinforces that. If you are brave enough to sort of go into a class, right, or you are required to take it for some reason, then we slam you with poor pedagogy that reinforces that you are not part of that. And that's work that we have to do also on our realm in terms of pedagogy at all levels, right? And but at the college level, and which we have good research that shows that if we teach differently, women and students of color are going to feel much more welcome in all the STEM disciplines. So for me, this is timely. I have embraced it and supported it prior to being chancellor. Now that I have the larger role, it's an incredible opportunity, and also an invitation to think about other things. And I'll say one more example just to give you a sense. We have SEEK, one of our opportunity programs, right, which is a program that allows individuals that come from lower incomes some flexibility in our admission standards to come in. They get additional support, and the data shows that they graduate at rates with everybody else, right? So it's very good. So few of those students are in STEM and tech fields. I got some data, and I said, here we have an entire program, right, coming from individuals that come from low-income backgrounds, and which is geared to support how do we work with that program so that we encourage most of those students to go into STEM and tech careers, right? So it's not just this element, but we're looking across the system of different spaces that we have to incentivize more students going into these fields.
That's really helpful, Chancellor. Thank you. Rich, let me bring you back in on this point. I've been thinking a little bit about some of those specific needs and opportunities the Chancellor mentioned, but even going beyond that, to think about, we've come a long way with CS4All since 2015 and your time in government as well. But I want to kind of focus on what's next. What would your advice be for Mayor Adams on this, for folks who are in that decision-making role in government right now? Mm-hmm. What more is needed? What are the specific gaps that need to be understood today to be able to make more progress? Where would you like to see city leaders focus their attention on expanding computing education at this point?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing how you answer that question. Look, I think in some ways...
It's coming, Councilmember, don't worry.
But for me, I think we've heard a lot of it, right? So, I believe in planning backwards. So ultimately the goal is to make sure that every student graduates from 12th grade with a set of skills and a set of beliefs about themselves and their ability to participate in this economy. Then you can work back from that. And so I think fundamentally what you need is a K through 12, I even say a pre-K through 12 sequence of study that ensures that people are building the foundational skills from the earliest ages, just as you were describing, right? Just as you were able to do in your own classroom, so that by the time people graduate from 12th grade, they have those skills. So, I think there are two tracks to that and that we've already discussed, right? So one track is sort of the formal classes. We know from your research that there just aren't a lot of programs in computer science available in K through 5, so we have to build those programs. In middle school, everybody should have to take a class in computer science, computational thinking in middle school. In high school, everyone should have to take an introduction to computer science class. Every high school student should have available to them college-level courses, whether through AP, through partnerships with CUNY. So we should have that sequence that's built out and that is expected, just like you're expected to take foreign language, you're expected to take, so part of it is building that into the curriculum, which is hard. There's limited real estate during the day, and so this is I don't mean to be flippant about the challenge, but I think that's part of it. But then, just as importantly, as I think everybody has been talking about, those courses aren't the only opportunity to introduce these skills. And so how do you incorporate computational thinking skills into the full curriculum to every course? And of course, the challenge there is around, one of the challenges there is around the skills and the confidence of the teachers who, came through the same system and came through the same system with the same fears that their students have, right? And this is why, we're really blessed, not just because you're here, but, I think Phalo's been a transformative leader of the CUNY system. It is the critical partner in all things in the city. It is the institution that New York City kids go to for college. It is a college that actually, most colleges in America, elite colleges, they reproduce the privilege that those students' parents had. CUNY is the one place where, actually students come into CUNY and advance socially, economically from the time in CUNY. So we have this tremendous partner, again, the partner that's also teaching our teachers. And so part of it is in investing in that partnership with CUNY, which Robin Hood is proud to do, supporting some really innovative work at CUNY designed to help train teachers, not just computer science teachers, but all teachers, making sure that I think at scale will be 30% of teachers are receiving education in computational pedagogy. So I think those are the kind of things that we have to do. And the other thing I will say, just from the experience, my own personal experience and the experience of my child, that was sort of thinking about it as you talked about it, part of it is also, again, making sure that students of color, it's not only about teaching the skills, but it's about helping students of color see themselves in this work, see themselves as people who can engage and excel in these subjects. My oldest son, who's now at NYU, went to Brooklyn Tech. And he just always loved Brooklyn Tech in the house? All right.
Oh, right there.
All right. I went to Stuyvesant, my friend Zygmunt over there. We went to Stuyvesant, but it's okay. But he went to Brooklyn Tech, and it's funny, like we went to visit Brooklyn Tech, and at that point we walked into the robotics lab, and he was not interested in going anywhere else after that. And so thank goodness he passed the test, because I don't know what he was going to do. But that's sort of but what I would say about his experience in Brooklyn Tech is, as we all know, there aren't a lot of black kids at Brooklyn Tech. And so even in an environment where this was not an issue, where any course he wanted to take in STEM was available to him, even in that school, it was not an environment where he could see himself. Now, he has parents who have been able to try to help navigate that. He participated in All-Star Code, which, if folks don't know, is a program that the centerpiece of the program is the summer program for black men, young black men, where they're studying coding. And so that program was so important because he was in a room with other black boys who loved technology, being taught by teachers who were young men, often who are college students who are studying technology. I've tried to make an effort to make sure that he can meet people who I know who work in tech, who are men of color. So I think also making sure that young people have not only these academic access, but also that we invest in programs like All-Star Code and make sure that more young people have exposure to the examples, to the mentors, to help them see themselves in this field.
Thanks, Rich. Councilmember, Rich is right. I did absolutely want to hear your thoughts on that question too. Maybe just also specifically about, you have had so much of this experience in schools. Some of your colleagues, many of your colleagues have not. What did they need to know about expanding computing education? What would you like to see your colleagues on the city council do to support this work, to expand on it, to build on it? What would you like to see the mayor and his team do to be able to accelerate what's happening and go beyond it in ways that you think would be helpful?
Investments. We have to invest. We can't sit and say it's going to happen magically. It's not. We have to put the money where our mouth is. I believe in it, and as the chair of education, I'm always fighting inside the council to make sure that we fund things. We fund CUNY. If New York City Public School is the feeder to CUNY, which we are, that's the pipeline. So we have to make sure that pipeline is strong by providing those set skills that the students need to succeed in computer science, problem solving, and all of those skills that come in has to start from K to 12 in order when I hand fellow a student, he can continue the work that I've started. It's not it's not starting over, but it's building on what the foundation is. So a strong foundation, I always tell all my new teachers that I mentor, if you have a strong foundation, your top will be strong. So by the time they leave New York City Public Schools, they enter the CUNY system, they should have all those skills already in place. So that means investing in those skills, not under-investing. Which is what we've been doing for a long time. So this chair is believe in investing, and that's one of the things I've been fighting for, and the mayor knows that, and I have that conversation. If we don't invest, those tech positions in New York, over 600,000, will never be filled. We will have to export the talent while we have it here. And CUNY is the best partnership that we have in terms of an urban college, affordable, where to me, we should also start AP classes. So by the time they enter CUNY, computer science is already built in, and they're just thriving from that, jumping from that public school journey into CUNY. And it will build a pipeline into all the tech careers that we talked about, we're discussing. So invest, Mayor Adams, we're gonna invest in tech, invest in all of these groups and startup groups, and invest in groups that students that look like us as well. I go into rooms all the time and no one looks like me. And I'm talking about tech and they're all looking at me like, okay, she knows about tech and that's it. But they have to see themselves. As you mentioned, they have to see themselves in the room as well.
That's really helpful. Can I just follow up on that point too? And
Sure.
I think, you know, there's a lot here on the table, and just in terms of investments that need to be made. But I'd love to get your sense of, you know, given some of the specific things that you've seen, whether it's the professional development for current teachers, the pre-service training, or maybe completely other things, maybe some things that haven't come up yet today. And I think also a little bit about to the earlier question from the audience about getting technology into our schools. You know, it strikes me that since 2020, we have done a lot more to get devices into classrooms, to wire classrooms, but we also know that not every teacher or student feels equipped to actually use the technology that's there. And I think that was part of where, you know, your work is kind of built on bringing technology in, but then making sure that it's actually being applied. And maybe there's other things that haven't even come up today, but I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, can you help us understand, with all the different competing needs out there, what are one or two of the specific investments around computing education that you would want to see the city prioritize?
So I'm going to go back to March of 2020. School shuts down. I'm the tech person for my building. I moved 600 kids Google online. I'm running for office. And I looked and I said, wow, I can't leave. So I'm running for office and I'm teaching in the morning. I'm teaching, moving my teachers, supporting the teachers in the building, who a lot of them lacked the confidence or did not have access to technology themselves. When we found out, I was like, oh, you don't have a computer at home. No, Miss Joseph. So this was the first time they were having to, so I had to train my staff. At the time I had my campaign staff, they'll tell you. I was training teachers to get online. I would go into the rooms and literally set up the classrooms for my educators to make sure that the students are moving. And then word got around town that I knew stuff. All the other schools started calling. So I was troubleshooting for every other school around New York City. And that's when it dawned on me that teacher training, fellow, as you teach it, include computer training, not just to open and turn off, to really use a computer, to attach, to know the skills, to know the offices, the basic stuff. Even if it's Microsoft Office, a lot of students like, I submitted my work, Miss Joseph, it's not attached. It's not there. And this was an opportunity. I also saw that a lot of parents were sitting in on the classes and they were learning as their child was learning. So this wasn't just like, oh, we're shutting down schools, but it was shutting down schools and then you also teaching parents, teachers, and students at the same time. So this was a very challenging time. So my takeaway from this is the students, the teachers, the professional developments have to center around technology. Technology is the way to go. So we must center that. And while we're investing, we're centering technology, because if we don't invest in it, our students will not have the skills they need to thrive in the tech world. And this is all tech, but it also has to be celebrated. It can't be one. I made technology in my building the most important thing every single day. So I had a robot. I made the robot follow me into the cafeteria. Ooh, wow, Miss Joseph, what is this? Create the curiosity, create the excitement. I had my robot dance, and then I went to a training at Microsoft. They gave me a Dash. The Dash was following me all around the school building. I used to make it follow, and the kids used to come out, and I used to battle my teachers to create the excitement. So Mr. Brown, who was my dean, he used to come with his little robot. We used to battle each other, and the kids used to be like, wow. So it became a reward. Okay, I'm going to behave because I want to play with Dash. I want to experiment that. So I was able to get a portable STEM lab. I was able to push it. So now I am coming in with the tools. I'm like, oh, not enough laptops? Got it. I wrote a grant, then borough president funded my program, gave me STEM on wheels. So I had 30 laptops on a cart, and I would push it into the classrooms to teach computer science. And it came with a robot, and I would program the robot, gave them the chance, allowed the teachers. Then one of the things I negotiated, a lot of schools, they get technology, right? It sits there, no one to train them. So when I negotiated this with then borough president, I said, I need PD attached to this. And I trained the other teachers in the room. And it wasn't only for me, I brought in other teachers. And I said, you're gonna turn key. You're gonna pick one person on your grade level and you're gonna turn key. So that's how they all got to use the robot. Now that I left the blueprint behind for them in the school building, they can use the computer lab without having it to sit there. Because I was talking to a group and I was like, you guys need a 3D printer. And this group was like, oh yeah, we got one. Where is it? It's in the box. No, it cannot be in the box. So I walked over to this group, I set it up for them, and then I trained the teachers, and then I said, now find a partner. someone you like. You know, teachers be like, I don't like so-and-so, I don't work. They act just like the kids. So I'm like, find someone you like and then train them. So now they're using 3D printers. I left the building with 3D printers for them to use. And I'm saying, this is the way, guys, where you can build your house. I just went to visit my alma mater. They have one where you can build anatomy. You could build hearts, body parts, houses. Everything will be 3D. But you have to train the teachers, and it can't. And a lot of these grants, when you get them, they don't come with professional development. They should come with training for the teachers. And it shouldn't be one time. It should be ongoing, upkeep, upgrade to make sure these skills are embedded.
That's really helpful, Councilmember. Thank you.
You could clap. Go ahead.
I'm never going to step on an applause line if I can avoid it. Chancellor, I want to ask you something about something we haven't really talked too much about yet today. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't. Understandably, so much of this conversation has been focused on integrating computing pedagogy across the school system, and it seems like that is absolutely the place to focus, and that's what the CIT program is doing. But we also have a major need and opportunity to train those CS teachers as well. And I want to ask you, because CUNY is playing a key role here, but we also know that there are relatively few certified CS teachers in our school system today, or very, very few. At the same time, because the state level standards didn't even come into force until December of 2020, this is new for New York. So help us understand, what is CUNY's role in training and certifying CS teachers? Where are you today? Where would you like to be in a year from now or 5 years from now? How does that align with the needs that you see in our school system today?
Well, it's a great question, and I think a reference was made in the previous panel, for example, of things that were done. I think in Arkansas was the reference there, right? And one of the things that I liked there was the fact that the teachers who were participating got stipends. One of the things when we began all of this conversation, I said, we're going to be training all these folks, really hot computational computer science. There's a huge market out there that's competing against us in K-12 and in college for this talent, right? Unless we provide some incentives, these people are going to do this. They're going to do it for a year or two, and then they're going to be stolen because there's going to be opportunities so much in the tech sector. So one element that I've always said in all these programs is that we need to not just expand the pipeline of the faculty that have the credentials to do that, but if we don't create some kind of incentive structure in the public schools, they're going to be there for a couple of years, and there's going to be the next opportunity that is going to take them to go work in a place that they can make a lot more money. So I think that incentive structure, I think they also talked about the idea of having some of the teachers go and have, externships in the companies is really, really important. And particularly for teachers who've been in the field for a long time and they need to refresh. It's also basic networking, right? Once you do that, they're going to have somebody in the company they can call to for additional professional development, for a guest speaker, for internships. I mean, it's a really, really important loop to continue. But I think that it's a growing field. We need to do more. But I think that long term, if we don't, and I'm very proud that CUNY provides a third of the teachers that go into the DOE, right? But a statistic that for me that is more a source of pride is that the best retention rates, the faculty that stays the longest are the CUNY faculty, right? 5 years in, we have much higher rates than any other teacher education programs there. I mean, I think in part it's because our students come from the DOE, they represent the communities where they're going to teach and do all that. But to that point, if we don't think about the retention part of it, we're going to be losing people. We're going to be investing, and it's going to be good, and it's going to be training, but they're not going to have the lasting effect that you heard. Sort of committed faculty can have in terms of leadership, advocacy, all the things that you need. And the second part of it is also those teachers are going to be the assistant principals and the principals of the future, right? The folks that are going to make sure that as that school continues to grow, these ideas are not just something that is delegated to a subset of what they're doing, but that is really a core part of that, what that elementary school, that middle school, or that high school is doing.
Thanks, Chancellor. It's really helpful. And on that note, I'd like to actually open it back up to our audience, who's been very patient. I think has a lot of ideas and insights. we'd love to get questions for these wonderful panelists. As before, if you could raise your hands, we'll bring a microphone to you, let us know your name, any organization you're here with, and please do try to keep your questions short so we can get to as many as possible. So why don't we start right there in the middle? I see with your hand up on the third row. Thank you.
So my name is Pedro Suarez, and I am the program director at Lift New York, which is a career and financial coaching program for parents of young children. We're based in the Bronx. And mine is more of a comment than a question, but what has come up in this conversation that I wanted to elevate is the importance of engaging families and the parents and caregivers, particularly in partnership with community-based organizations. And I think that that's also a part of addressing the issues that we've seen with the digital divide that some folks have elevated here today. Lyft has been working really closely with the New York City Office of Technology and Innovation, and they're rolling out a program to extend access to NYCHA residents. And we've been working really closely with Bronx Community College and Hostess Community College to serve students that have children. And we've also been engaging in conversations with Robin Hood on the policy side in terms of what needs to happen in order to really empower families. And so what I just wanted to continue to elevate is we can't just all put it on teachers. We can't just all put it on the students as well, right? We need to create spaces and continue to promote those public-private partnerships with the community-based organizations that have been around for so many years to have like a shared impact. And so that's just something I wanted to elevate. And if you definitely want to speak to some of that work that's happening to support, bolstering computing education on the family side, I think that would be something great if you can highlight anything that your respective organizations are doing around that.
Can I answer?
Thank you, please. Yeah.
When I taught at PS6, I realized I had a huge immigrant population, and I always want my parents to participate in their child's education. So I spoke to D79, which represents the adult division in the DOE, and I spoke to my principal, and I said, why don't we engage those families in providing ESL for them in the evening? So when they came in, I assessed, and I was like, oh, some of them are pretty advanced. The only barrier is the language. So I created this program called ESL Integrated with Technology. So while they were learning English, they were also learning how to use computers. So that was not only are they learning the parts in English, but they were also creating emails, which most of them never had before, typing a letter on Microsoft, teaching them Excel. And that was one way we were able to bring the parents into the building, keep them engaged, and they could become better advocates for their children's education. So that was one way I leveraged the partnership with the parents, who sometimes we forget, which is very important. And that was one of the things I was screaming during the pandemic. I was like, we need something for the parents. We need something for the parents. Finally, I noticed that the DOE finally came up with Parent University to engage the parents in what the students were learning at the same time.
Councilmember, just on that note, really quickly, is there something you'd like to see the city champion next around Parent University, or another specific initiative that could actually help more parents be engaged around computing education specifically?
Definitely. They can invest a little bit more money into D79 that has all these technology programs, and they can have parents come in after work. These programs are run during the evening from 6 to 9.
That's really helpful. Yeah. No, thank you. Other questions? Go ahead, Rich, please.
On that last question, the city has made over the last several years a tremendous investment in community schools, public schools, where the city essentially invests in a nonprofit partner to coordinate a range of extra school services that might be around health, after school, et cetera. And again, it's a platform. Some of the infrastructure is here, but you could imagine making sure that those community schools all have the capacity to bring technology education to parents in the way that you were able to do at PS6.
And we expanded that. This council expanded community schools, especially after COVID.
Well, thank you for your comment. It also reminds me of the role of libraries as well, where they're so good, skilled at family literacy as one of many approaches, and also doing more digital skills training than maybe any other institution, but bringing that family approach to the kind of digital skills training that we're talking about. Sir, in the back, and then I see one other question on the far left. We'll take as many as we can before we run out of time.
Hello, my name is Doug Moody. I'm a City Tech professor at CUNY. Jeanette Wing, who was at Carnegie Mellon University, was the person in early 2000 that coined the phrase computational thinking. She also created a course that all CMU majors, regardless, take. Okay, Hofstra University has that as well. So my question for you, mostly the chancellor, would you support a standard computational thinking course required for all majors in all CUNY programs?
I think that is in consultation with the faculty, so I want to be able to keep my job, right? I think, absolutely. When I mentioned the point that I think that this is part of, when you think about the liberal arts education, you talk about sort of, being able to read and write, clearly, to have critical thinking skills, to be able to work in teams. I think that computational thinking is part of that menu of things now. I imagine that in many ways, we have elements of that already in the curriculum. But I think it's something that we should engage, and we should do it because, and this was part of the conversation of the previous panel too, right? And also do it the correct way, right? Which is to really have a conversation, create consensus as to what should be part of that, and have some uniformity. Because what happens in many places is that to say that you do the requirement, they said, we're going to have a requirement for this, and then they say, all these things fit the category, right? And you can take smelling for tech, and that would count as part of your computational literacy. That's one way that many places deal with requirements, and that is really the wrong approach. So I think that that's something that engages our faculty, and we have people who are leaders in those fields, but I think it's something that is a key element that people should want in students that have a diploma that comes from the City University of New York. So fully supportive of something done in a way that engages the experts, the faculty.
Thanks for the question. Thanks, Chancellor. Could you see the show of hands one more time? We have right in the back row on the right, please. And then I think we might have time for one more. We'll see if we can get there. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Gall. I'm the founder and executive director of Digital Girl, Inc. And I just actually more of a comment and just really want to thank you all for this conversation. Just hearing so many of the things that I'm saying on a day-to-day basis about what it really takes to get the support that's necessary for students when it comes to computer science. We were founded in 2014, so almost right along the lines of CS4All. And we've seen a lot of change where schools are asking not just for after-school programs, but now we're in schools as well. But it's just so much more than just providing computer science. We started from just teaching the kids K through 12 to then teaching the parents, to then teaching senior classes, because we're seeing so many grandparents raising their kids, right? And there's this tech gap. And then, also with the pandemic, when students got technology, but a lot of them got technology that didn't support what they needed. So then we ended up donating laptops to students. Well, it was supposed to be borrowed, right? But we know how that went. Some of them we didn't get back, and that was okay. But just knowing that there's so much investment that's really necessary for community-based organizations to get the work done. And I just really want to thank you all for having this conversation and shedding light to what we're going through. And I just really love the statistics that you share with us about the pipeline, right? The students are K through 12, and then they're going to CUNY, and then they're becoming the same teachers, right, that are working with our students in the schools. And what we're seeing is that when we have teachers who really understand computer science, our programs go so much better than the teacher that doesn't understand. If we have that support, we have better classes. And so thank you for this.
Can I share an anecdote that connects to that and some of the things? So about investments, one of the things, and I go back to my experience at Queens, right? When I was in a campus, when we began investing, the city council gave us money to have a tech incubator. And I hope that we continue to support that in the next budget. But what that space created, that was part entrepreneurship and all that. What that created on our campus was, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences I had when I was president there, is dynamics. The computer science club space was dominated by the guys. And we had this group of really amazing, amazing women that, couldn't really be part of that space. The incubator became their home. They began working with the companies there, mentorship there, and they took over the world. I funded hackathons. All this energy that came from, giving students tools to advance and give them support, overall, then things improve, right? And things got better. But additional investments, in this case, the presence on a campus of a tech incubator, which is connected with that whole business community and teaching community. I go to bed at night still with a sweatshirt from that group of women that had a hackathon that talked about women in tech. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences about seeing what, students that have all the talent, all the energy, all the desires, right? And all they need is additional opportunities to be able to succeed, and that's our role. But we need to be intentional about knowing where the gaps are, where the lack of equity is, and invest there. But that's another part of investing in something that is not teachers and that, but it's part of an ecosystem of support.
Well, Chancellor, I think that's the perfect note, unfortunately, and for all of you here in the room to end on. If you join me in a round of applause, though, for this amazing group of panelists. We so appreciate your time. Thank you all. Really a pleasure. Thank you all for being here today. For everybody tuning in online, special thanks to Robin Hood and the Learning and Technology Fund and to Google for making this whole event possible. And check out all of our work at nycfuture.org. Thank you all so much.